Sigal, and that's a wonderful gesture, Marlene, for wonderful friend, and Marcia. My usual weekly update is actually not just from Yerushalayim, but I can bring you regards from Herzliya and Petach Tikva. Yesterday, my sister and niece Hila and Batya and I took a trip to Petach Tikva as my niece Hila is graduating this year from high school and is going to begin her service of this country, and she's going to be in the Defense Department. And that being said, she needed a background check. And that was going to take place yesterday for a few hours in Petach Tikva. So we drove there, left her there, and then went to Herzliya for Batya to pick up things to bring back here. It was a wonderful day. It was sunny and just feeling free to drive around. The only low point was that when Hila got back in the car, I was very, very insulted that they did not ask her any questions about her aunt, which means that on the paperwork, I must have appeared very boring. Anyway, so we wish Sheila strength to strength. It's wonderful to see you again, hoping that everybody is still coping. Megillat Ruth focuses on chesed. Shavuot is a celebration of the giving of our Torah, Zman Matan Toratenu, a book of laws. So why join the two? I used to suggest that doing so sends a message. What's that message? It's not enough to follow the law. One must go beyond the letter of the law, lifnim mishurat hadin. That's true, but of late, I think more about these two texts, Megillat Ruth and Torah, and their acknowledgement that life is complicated and people are complicated. There isn't one main character in the Megillah who doesn't face a difficult situation. All must ask themselves questions, and they're questions that still stand today. Now, I'd like you to think about these questions, and in fact, I would open our session up to you offering answers to the questions as we go through them. Don't be shy. And I can see, I'm just saying this, I only see 4 people. I don't know if that can change, Sigal, because if I don't see you, then we can try the chat, or you can unmute yourself and hopefully nobody will speak together with somebody else.
Bracha,
yeah.
So at the top, can you click on gallery view, not speaker view? Then you should be able to see like 20 people.
Okay, just a second.
Top right-hand corner.
Okay. Hey, I did that without calling my tech person. Okay. All right. So, please again, some of these questions might demand that you be not shy, but hey, we've known each other a long time. So, I want you to imagine you are a leader of your community during a citywide crisis that is impacting on health, perhaps even survival. What internal conversations do you think you would have with yourself? You're the leader. There's this crisis. What would be going on in your mind? And what actions would you take? Together with that, if you were the wife or husband of this leader, what would your input be during his or her deliberations? So think, but don't think too hard, and be spontaneous. What would be going on in your head?
What can we do to help everyone?
Okay?
You have to consult with a lot of people to hear what the people want.
Okay. Anybody else?
Have to converse with experts to find out the best way to handle the situation.
Yeah.
Okay, Nechama.
I save myself and my family, or do I really worry about the community and my people?
Okay, Nechama, could you tell me what your decision is, since I'm nearby, what you would do? Okay, Marlene.
I'll take you
Marlene.
everywhere.
I think you're really on the edge. It's a double-edged sword. I mean, on the one hand, and this is what a lot of our healthcare professionals are battling with. They're in there helping the community, and yet they have to go home to their families, and I'm sure are worrying about them all the time. But if I can go to the book of Ruth with Elimelech, I mean, he left the community, and according to another teacher, Hannah, that I studied with many years ago, one of the things that she taught was that one of the reasons that he actually died was because he left the community.
You almost took us too far. With Marlene saying that, I have to tell you, some of you are just sitting, I see day after day at these different sessions, because I'm seeing a couple of you that I saw on a lesson that I looked at in the recording. I also saw a couple of you. I actually joined Hannah Werner's lesson yesterday from Beth Tzedek. I have to tell you, I missed not seeing you there. It was a different feeling. But yes, anybody else? Obviously, the questions that I'm sharing with you are meant to take us into our Megillah. I'm also assuming that we're familiar with the story, though I will give you certain bits of information in case anybody is not quite sure. So now, again, imagine that you're the spouse of that leader in that time already, if we're talking about the time of the judges in ancient times. What do you think you would do? So better if it's that time, then obviously the leader would be the male, except for certain exceptions. What do you think a wife would do in that particular situation? The husband says, we're leaving town. Roz, you look like you want to say something.
But I didn't include leaving town. I was going to say, be careful about yourself. Make sure you're okay.
Okay. Now, are you referring to the wife or the leader?
The wife saying to her husband, the leader, it's fine for you to help, but make sure you don't come to harm.
But if this is the leader who was elected or must lead, you can't just throw that away. It's an obligation.
Well, it would be the wife who would be worried about it.
Of course, that goes without saying. Nevertheless, there's an obligation there. There's a responsibility if it's an elected official or.
So Bracha, I was thinking
Yes,
back
Sam.
back in those times, I think it's obvious. The wife would defer to the husband. Go along with whatever he says. You're the
Okay.
boss.
Okay, Marlene?
I was actually going to say the same thing as Stan. You didn't have a choice.
Yeah, but if we look at the book of Devorah, you know, when you know, she was saying we have to fight, and you know, she went with you know, the man didn't want to go, but he says, if you come, then I'll do it. You know, so if she was willing to be responsible, then he may have gone along with it.
That's what I meant about there being certain exceptions. Okay, let's move on. So let's imagine, chas v'shalom, you lose your husband at a very young age. You remain extremely close with your mother-in-law. I think we have to ask the Solomons to go on mute. Okay. Thank you. You remain extremely close with your mother-in-law. She is leaving town to go back to her original home. Would you go with her? Together with that, if you're the mother-in-law, would you want your deceased son's wife to remain with you? Now, you're already thinking about this in the context of Megillat Ruth, but don't necessarily, or yes, necessarily. So again, would you, a young daughter-in-law who's from Moab, what would move you to go with your mother-in-law? That's a strange activity. Yeah.
Doesn't it depend on the relationship they built or not?
Obviously, yeah, of course, depending on the relationship. Anything
It
else?
also depends on what her relationship with her original family is and how participatory she was in rituals and things with the son and the mother-in-law. I mean, I think in this story, it is definitely a unique thing, but there are situations where the daughter-in-law prefers the mother-in-law to the mother. I've seen it. Not in my case, but
I didn't want to say that. Okay.
no, I'm not saying my kids react that way. I'm just saying I remember once meeting a family where that was the relationship. The mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law just had a bond that was unbelievable.
Well, it seems also in the Megillah, you know, it says, Naomi says to her, they fall on her, they kiss her farewell, they break into weeping. They obviously have a wonderful relationship with both daughters-in-law.
Yeah, it could be that she didn't want to break ties with the family of her late husband as well. She wanted to continue in the tradition that she was getting accustomed to.
Okay. All great answers. Now, the second part of my question. If you were Naomi, the mother-in-law, would you automatically, let me put it differently, because we've already established that they had a wonderful relationship. What would be a reason that you might not want Ruth or Orpah, your daughters-in-law, to yes, come with you back to Beit Lechem?
Their own self-preservation. They're better off in Moab with their families.
Okay. They're young. She's not going to give them new husbands. They're not familiar with Beit Lechem. I love it. I'm saying Beit Lechem, and that's a street that's 2 minutes away from where I'm sitting now. So, anything else?
She also might be scared about what would happen in the community when she brought a Moabite woman back.
Beautiful. Absolutely. Now, as long as Marilyn brought that up, you should know that it was a big thing for Naomi's sons to marry Moabites because there's even a law in Sefer Dvarim that prohibits that, because the Moabites were known to be very stingy. When Bnei Israel, the Israelites, passed them during the Exodus, the Moabites were known to not have offered them water nor bread. However, when it comes down to it, it's really the males that were prohibited for the same reason, that the women really weren't involved. But that still is an issue. They were not part of Israel. So that could have been an issue. I'm coming back and I'm bringing these strange women. Okay. The next question. You might not have made the decision, Naomi, but in fact, you left. Beit Lechem, your husband, was one of the key leaders in that community during a crisis. Would you be comfortable in returning after abandoning your people? How do you think you would rationalize fear of going back, or what would make you feel comfortable in going there? It's understandable that she would want to return to her home, even if she's been in Moab and been comfortable and cared for by her daughters-in-law. But Marilyn.
Don't forget she had a field that she sold, so she had her only source of income was back there, was back home.
Okay, she is now poor. She's of course very exhausted. She's very distressed and depressed, losing her husband and her sons. But it would be the stronger feeling, I want to go home and I'm willing to take whatever it's going to take to face the people that I abandoned. There must have been enough in her to feel that she had people close enough that she wouldn't feel too much of an outcast. Okay.
Bracha.
Helen.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, we're taking it out of context. I would imagine that it was not unusual for there to be a bit of a nomadic spirit that happens when things were really grim. Even back in Joseph's time, the brothers, went elsewhere looking for food and stuff like that. So maybe we're putting too big a stigma on this leaving. And so maybe it wasn't such a big deal that she was going back. Sure, it would be difficult, but maybe she wasn't, I'm sure she was worried, but maybe it's not as strong as we're viewing it because we're taking it out of context of what those societies did.
Granted, on the other hand, if we, as Marlene offered before, if in fact the death of Elimelech, the leader, was a punishment for having left, we can look at it both ways.
Yeah.
Yes. I saw another hand.
When she came back, she felt like she was dead already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So she sort of felt there was nothing to lose. This is where her people were. This is, where, she felt she should be, but she still felt dead. And, sometimes you want to go back when you feel there's nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. Marlene.
Well, when she did go back, I mean, the women of the community were really not very accepting of her. And they really did look down on her because they said, so, you know what, this was your choice. You did it. Now, now it's happening to you.
Yeah. And we can appreciate that, I guess, unless they are so able to be compassionate and say, well, you were the wife and we understand that you had to defer to your husband. Okay, let's move on. And please, again, don't be shy. You are a man you are sleeping. You know what I'm about to say. And you awaken to a beautiful young woman laying beside you, inviting you and saying, if ever there was a pickup line, spread your wings over me. What do you think? And I'm looking at the men now, or the wives can say it what they think their husbands would say. Spread your wings over me. What would you do and why?
Well, first of all, Bracha.
Kelly, yes. Are you speaking to Michael?
No. Yeah. This man, this elderly man, was drunk to the gills. I don't think he even knew what was going on.
Well, there are different versions about what you're saying. Some will say that he was drunk. Others say that actually Ruth waited till she felt that he wasn't drunk, because she was not trying to pull a fast one on him. She didn't even use the exact instructions that Naomi gave her, because we know that it was Naomi, her mother-in-law, who had up until this point was training her to be a modest Israelite, now all of a sudden is sending her on a mission to seduce Boaz. So some say what you're saying, Shelley. Is there no man with us that is willing to speak on behalf of what some men might do? Come on. I'll buy you a coffee when you visit Yerushalayim. Lou, go ahead, Lou. No, you're muted.
His mute's on.
Unmute yourself, Lou. No?
Yeah, I'm going to be too easy, and this would be something that you read about in the papers, that somebody was entrapped. I don't know what I would do. I just don't know. I think that nature should take over itself. Nature would take over.
I see Anna sitting behind you, and I see the face she's making.
Yeah, she's there.
Good to see you, Anna.
Are you there?
Okay.
Yeah, she's there.
Okay. So, Boaz, or I can't help myself, better known as Bozo in my family for a particular reason. We know that he is 80 years old, but he has a vitality about him. But he wakes up, and unlike what might be human nature, he does not immediately welcome what would be inappropriate. Now, why inappropriate? Ruth is offering herself to him because she believes that he is the redeeming kinsman, without wanting to get into that we know she wants. And Naomi wants her to marry Boaz so that she will continue the family line and inherit the land and have continuity. But Boaz is able to restrain himself because he knows that he is not the closest kinsman. Now he says, I will check with he who is closer, and if he doesn't want to, I will be happy to. But there's something about Boaz that he can restrain himself.
Bracha, how do you know he's 80 years old?
Other midrashim tell us that. He's had a history. The midrash also tells us that it's only been a short time since he became a widower himself. And he had many children, and he lost them all.
Really?
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Oh.
So here we have a situation. I'm getting a message, but I don't get it. Marlene.
you know what? I think he's not the Harvey Weinstein type of guy. And you see this right from the beginning, even when he meets Ruth in the field earlier, he really tries to protect her from what might happen to her. So I think he's really a noble character and probably looks on her in a very fatherly way and is trying to protect her.
In fact, the text, we see that time after time he refers to her as his daughter, you know, when he's speaking to her, my daughter. Yeah. No, Boaz is known to be Ish Chayil. We all know the phrase Eshet Chayil, but being an exception to most of the people in his community. And we'll return to that shortly. Now, you are the woman that is sent to seduce that man. Under what circumstances could you see yourself agreeing to such a mission? Well, we won't belabor this because we know the context. And so it is very strange to Ruth that she would be involved in something like this, because even before Naomi, we have a sense that we don't know Ruth's family, but she herself must have had certain qualities that were not like the paganistic, immodest Moabites, and they were known to be that. I'm not just saying that. So Ruth is so concerned with making Naomi happy. And maybe that's even more important to her than continuing Machlon, her husband's family, that she's willing to do what would be considered an immodest act. Now, one more question, a big meta question. You are an individual, a daughter, a son, a mother, a father, a sister, a brother, an aunt, an uncle, a cousin, a grandparent, a husband, wife, or a friend. Do you think beyond these personal relationships? In other words, when you have to make decisions, whatever the situation is, whether it's bad or good, is there anything going on inside of you other than what is this going to mean for me personally, or what is it going to mean for the other personally? In other words, the bottom line is here, what are our characters concerned about? And we have a variety of interests with the characters that we have. But what is key to them, and what is key to Ruth? Now, let me state at the outset today, in this reading, in today's reading of the text, because maybe another year I would read it differently, this particular reading of Megillat Ruth, I will be encouraging you to see that Ruth is more than a role model for chesed. Ruth, I suggest, is the initiator from outside coming to shake up society of that time and the future. I repeat, there is an ultimate task that Ruth has. She is coming to Beit Lechem, to a society that is falling apart, And she wants to create the foundation for possible restoration of Israel's national identity. Nothing less. For indeed, she is the great-grandmother of David HaMelech, who unifies a people that had deteriorated to the point of civil war. In Ruth's time, Israel's society was endangered. One cannot describe that period of time as a time where Israel was an or lagoyim, a light unto the nations. Velo ki mitzion tetzei Torah. It was the time of the judges. And I just want to read one pasuk, and listen carefully. The very opening of the Megillah. Vayihi bimei shvot hashoftim, vayihi ra'av ba'aretz. In the days when the judges judged, setting the time. I'm going to repeat that. In the days when the judges judged. Now, there are a few possible meanings to the judges judged. In Hebrew, it's easier to come up with those. Bizman shvot hashoftim. So, when I say that the Israeli society at that time was despicable, those two words sum it up. It was a time when the judges who were meant to be leading the society, the judges themselves were being judged and laughed upon. In other words, the Israelites were rebelling against them. It was a time when they were not accepting their authority, not in any issue, whether religious, spiritual. They did not accept the military authority, the economic authority. It also is understood, shvot hashoftim, that perhaps it was God that was judging these judges because the judges themselves were corrupt. In other words, things were pretty bad. There was much violence. Women were exploited. And no unity between the tribes. Those same 12 tribes that we discussed last week on the breastplate of the Kohen. Chesed, compassion to others, well, Boaz was unique. Now, let's go back to Elimelech. Elimelech, yeah, he's in a position that, is he going to think of his own nuclear family, or is he going to leave? Now, what's suspicious about him leaving is to where he went. Usually when there was a famine, people went to Mitzrayim, to Egypt. He doesn't do that. He goes to Moab, which many believe indicates that he wasn't leaving because he didn't have lechem, food, bread. But he was leaving because he was known to be somebody that could have cared for everybody else in that community. And he was scared, and I don't mean scared in an acceptable way, that people were going to come begging to him. And he was reluctant to answer their pleas. And that's supported, it's said by Meforshim commentators, by the fact that he went to Moab, because as I said earlier, Moab was known to be very stingy. So Elimelech wanted to be amongst people that he knew were similar to him. Now, we're especially disappointed with an Elimelech because he was a leader. You do expect more from a leader. But how about Orpah, the other sister-in-law? The daughter-in-law who decides and is persuaded by Naomi to stay in Moab. She stays at home. Now, is she to be blamed for not going anywhere? What do you think? Does she have to feel guilty about the fact that she decides to stay in her hometown, Orpah?
I don't think so.
Merle?
Yeah, I don't think she needs to feel guilty. She made the decision that was right for her.
Okay.
I never felt that it was a wrong move for her. It was a natural move. I never felt that it wasn't right or she should feel guilty or whatever. Never felt that. It was natural and for her right, as Merle says. Just never had that feeling.
Okay, I agree. You just said natural. I think of it as normal. Again, for her to pick up and go to a strange land, she's young. She doesn't know that she'll be accepted there. She doesn't know that she'll find a husband because she's young enough for that. So it's felt that she just made the normal, natural choice. Family, happiness. On the other hand, a nice thought, by not going anywhere, Orpah lost 3,000 years of being present in history. Israel is alive, Moab isn't. Does it matter to Orpah that her great-great-great-grandchildren have fallen out of history? Normality is okay, but it is not visionary. And we're claiming that unlike her, Ruth was visionary, but most of us are like Orpah. Now, Naomi, Elimelech's widow, Ruth and Orpah's mother-in-law. She's normal. She dissuades Ruth and Orpah from coming with her. Why would that be a normal? Perhaps, even though she feels close. Maybe she just doesn't want that constant reminder of her daughters-in-law being there and seeing her sons when she looks at them. That could be normal. Even though, on the other hand, sometimes we want to have a picture in front of us of a lost one. She might be anxious, as said earlier, about them being Moabites. She also might feel a bit guilty, even though it was said earlier that as a woman she would have deferred to Elimelech. There still might be a part of her, because we learn that she's not entirely passive, as she suggests to Ruth to be so bold for the seduction, that maybe she is feeling that she could have done more to stop her family from moving to Moab. It's interesting, when she is instructing Ruth to go to the threshing floor, she says the following, and listen carefully if you find something strange. Bathe, anoint yourself, dress up, and I will go down to the threshing floor, but do not disclose yourself to the man. When he lies down, I will lie down. Did you catch something that I said twice? Naomi is giving instructions to Ruth, and she says, I will get dressed, I will go down, and I will lie down. Now, when the Megillah is chanted, that's changed to second person. But Meforshim commentators have suggested, why does she use the first person? Anybody? She's not the one that's actually going there. So why does she use first person? What might that be suggesting? One, that just as Ruth has glued herself to Naomi, that Naomi is now talking as if she is cleaving to Ruth. But what else might be a possibility? That Naomi, as much as she wants her family line to continue, and she feels that the only way to do this is through this seduction, and we'll get back to that in a moment, that she also realizes that she's sending somebody she loves into a very precarious position. If people see Ruth going to that threshing floor, they will immediately say, she's just like the Moabites. And she knows also that it could be dangerous walking at night by herself. So Naomi has these mixed feelings, but she is proactive enough to do this. Now, the question might be asked, why doesn't Naomi just approach Boaz, who, by the way, we think that Boaz actually might have still had feelings of resentment to Naomi, because you don't see him contacting Naomi. But why wouldn't, so that might be a reason that Naomi wouldn't have approached Boaz and say, come on, I've got this lovely young lady, why don't you marry her? Anybody want to suggest? A very practical reason. She felt that there's a chance, knowing that Boaz is so noble, that he might, if a broker comes and suggests it to him, that he'll be rational enough to say, nah, she doesn't need me. I'm an alter kacher, he doesn't need me. But if he is beside this beautiful woman looking into her eyes, he won't refuse. Now, Naomi wants Boaz because he is an Ish Chayil. And Ploni Almoni, the other closer kinsman, is not as worthy a person. He at first is willing to buy the land, but when he hears that it comes with Ruth, no way. So Naomi, when she uses first person, there's a part of her that is feeling, I'm talking this way because if things don't work out, I know that I should take some responsibility here. Just as she felt maybe she should take responsibility for having let the family come to Moab. Now, Boaz. A couple of things that are very striking about Boaz, and that makes him an exception to everybody else in his community. In the text, when he comes to see his fields, and there are many there, he happens to notice Ruth. Now, he might notice her because she looks foreign. Maybe her dress is foreign. But that still wouldn't necessarily be a reason for him to inquire about her. And certainly that she's a woman. He wouldn't give her that much prominence. But he does when he visits. And secondly, we've already said that he doesn't jump on her suggestion herself to him. Now, in the text, there's something that suggests why he was able to resist. Was he rational enough, realizing what I said earlier, that if he did have relations with her, he would be making Ruth an adulterer because he's not the closest kinsman? But again, would every man in that situation be able to be that rational and resist? Maybe yes, maybe no. But he says something to her that indicates that he really was a man, a modest man, and had respect for a woman, even though it was those times. He says, as Lord lives, he takes a vow and says, if I speak to the other kinsman and he is not willing, I will redeem you. It's felt that for him, that vow meant a lot, that he wasn't just a man of physical needs and desires, but he was somebody that one could respect. And there we have a match in heaven. We have two people, Ruth, who certainly goes beyond what is necessary. Boaz, he's just lost his wife of many years. He is older, but he still is committed, and you don't have a sense that there is romance there. They're caring of each other, that he is committed to an act of chesed as well, of making sure that there is continuity to Naomi's family. Ruth, our leading figure, is defined by her chesed. It's a chesed that goes beyond the norm, though. Her chesed involves self-sacrifice, staying with Naomi, relinquishing her dignity when she goes to the fields to collect the food, risking her reputation when she goes to the threshing floor, all to ensure Naomi's future. Yael Ziegler, a Tanakh scholar, actually questions the Midrash when it presents Ruth as a paradigm of chesed. And she asks, is the excessive nullification of self in deference to the needs of others, I'll repeat that, is Ruth's excessive nullification of self in deference to others' needs the ideal definition of chesed? What do you feel? Has Ruth gone overboard? Or is this someone that you think we should look at as a role model? Anyone? Or another comment? Do you look at her and say, oh, she's too much? Or are there such people? Anyone? Gloria. You're on mute, Gloria. Gloria. No, you muted yourself again.
Mute. Better now? 'Cause
Yes.
I just got the feeling that she just had such maybe an unnatural love for her mother-in-law, that she didn't care that much about herself, that she would do anything and everything that was within her power to make Naomi happy, no matter what was the results that would befall her as the result of this, what the consequences would be. That was my feeling, because if she really was concerned about her reputation or approaching an older man or doing any of these other things, she might have shied away from it. You said she was modest and so forth. That's a very big thing to ask a young, beautiful woman to do, to put herself in front of a man like that and take all the chances that she was taking.
Mm-hmm. Abe.
Well, isn't there a chance that there's some self-interest involved as well? I mean, she knows the man is good. She knows that the man arranged for her to get all those gleanings and so on. It's been very good to her all along, and she knows that this may be to her future. She came with the mother hoping that something would happen back in Bethlehem, and it's happening. Then why shouldn't she go on?
I think what Abe is suggesting speaks to what I said at the very beginning, that we're presenting a side of Ruth, and I think what you're saying doesn't take away from that. But she is not just thinking of Naomi, but she could feel that she has what to gain from it, aside from having this wonderful relationship. And as was suggested, we don't know what kind of relationship she had with her family back in Moab. So we don't have to assume what Yael Ziegler has said. I agree. Because I would like to close with suggesting that even if she is so giving and doing these actions for Naomi, that isn't nullification of her being. Even if she weren't maybe going to get a decent husband out of it, but rather than nullification, Ruth is actually enriching herself. And with that, I wish everyone a Chag Shavuot Sameach and continue to be well. And I look forward to seeing you again. Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
Wonderful, Bracha.
Beautiful.
Well done.
For thought, Bracha.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Bracha.
Very cool.
Wait for the next series, Bracha.
Amen.
Looking forward to it.
Me too.
We get a peek at Betcha?
Batya. You want to